Welcome, everybody, to Connecting the Universe. I'm author and researcher Mike Ricksecker. I have a great interactive class coming up for you tonight. What is the shadow dimension? The shadow dimension, of course, is the docuseries that I released last year. It's currently running on Tubi TV. There's some other streaming platforms where you can get it, and some others have picked it up here recently. So, 4 other streaming platforms across the world, and it's just, I guess, a matter of time before they actually make it live. I keep checking to see so I can make the announcement. Hey, it's live on this platform. Hey, it's live on that platform. We're not going to be talking about the Shadow Dimension docuseries specifically. We're going to show some clips from it. We're going to get some snippets, and we're going to talk about some of the themes and concepts within it, because I'm starting to see more and more now that this term is starting to be used more often. So we'll get into that in just a moment. Of course, those that are joining us live here, again, usually Wednesday night. It's not a Thursday tonight because of all the crazy stuff that happened earlier this week. But those that are in the private Facebook group for Connected Universe Portal members, please make sure you have the permissions set there so I can see all of your wonderful names. And for those listening to the podcast later, please come out here and join us on a weekly basis. You get the full presentation, ask any question you want. You can watch the video clips. ConnectedUniversePortal.com is the Connecting the Universe weekly class. And of course, you get all of the other great content on the back end as well. All the Egypt videos, American Southwest videos, the Ireland stuff will be coming up. You get the monthly Q&A videos, all kinds of video blogs and articles back there. So sneak peek stuff of things I'm working on. So you guys get that first. All right. So we had our class question, which let me go ahead and bring that up here. What do you think shadow entities really are? Spirits, interdimensional beings, extraterrestrials, all the above, or something else? So again, it being a bit of an off day, we didn't get as much feedback as we usually get. But Betty Lange said, if I saw one, my first thought would be a person who just passed and not moved on, which is absolutely something that a shadow entity could be. Now, we're not going to get into like the specifics of, what are shadow entities, what are the different types, how do they manifest, all that. We've done classes on that before, and we always come back to it because we always get new information that's coming to light on this subject, which is absolutely fascinating. And with one of the points that I brought up here, are they ET? So that'll be the segment on Ancient Aliens tomorrow night, March 4th, 9:00 p.m. Eastern Time on the History Channel. We will be discussing shadow entities as extraterrestrials, that some of these are actually ET. So tune in for that. And really, in the research that I've done, a shadow entity can be a myriad of different things. Yes, they can be a human spirit. They can't fully manifest, like Betty had said there. They can be an extraterrestrial. They can be an interdimensional being. They can be a large variety of different things. They can be time slips. Again, we're not going to get into all of those details for this class, but the question then becomes, because I named the docuseries The Shadow Dimension, and we have seen here recently, I mentioned the show Archive 81 last week. Again, not trying to give away any significant spoilers or anything like that. I think I steered clear of all that last week when we talked about secret societies in the circle. But in this particular scene here, when he's really just summing up what's been going on in all the episodes up to here, he uses the term the shadow dimension, which I've actually trademarked, but of course I'm not going to go after him because I'm just like, cool. The concept of the shadow dimension is getting out there, which is fascinating to me, that people are starting to recognize that there is more to all of this phenomenon. And of course, as you get deeper into the shows, they're trying to essentially summon that dimensional plane to be able to access that dimensional plane. That's where the circle came into play. So we'll examine really that aspect of it, accessing this dimensional space. What are dimensions? How are these entities coming into our plane of existence? That's what we're looking at here this evening. So let me go ahead and get this banner off. I think you guys got it down there. So and there's Betty. All right, great to see you down there, Betty. And Sarah Yusuf is in the house. All right. So yeah, Betty, we used your quote here, that you thought a shadow would be a person who had passed and not moved on. So thank you for that. Okay, gonna do a little fun aside here before we really start getting into it. I have a number of video clips queued up for tonight, but this first one is kind of more of a fun one from when we were out in Egypt last June. This is Johnny Enoch and I on the banks of the Nile. We were getting a little wet there, and the Nile River is actually surprisingly cold. You think of Egypt very hot, and we were there in June, so it was roasting hot. But the Nile River is actually very, very cool water. And so here we go.
Hi.
You're getting your feet wet in the Nile?
We absolutely are. The Nile is the best place to come for the most powerful energy.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. Here with Mike Ricksecker.
Out here with Johnny Enoch.
Enter the shadow dimension.
Yeah, so having a little fun there on the banks of the Nile. That guy back there taking some video, and he is insisting on selling whatever those little fake dagger things were. But yeah, Johnny and I had a lot of fun on that trip. We were always doing the haunted road roast. Haunted road roast that helps you hunt ghosts. That line that Tim Schoen always loved for me to say. Johnny had a lot of fun with that on that trip, and then also kind of the same thing there with the shadow dimension. A lot of fun. So speaking of Egypt, I do want to give a little background history here of shadows throughout our ancient history. I'm not going to do a full focus on this. Some of you have seen some of this information before, especially if you've seen my presentations, or if you've taken, we had the Unveiling the Shadows workshop there like a year and a half ago, or if you've purchased the Shadow Entities online course from the Connected Universe portal. This is in there as well. But just to kind of take a look back here at the way some of the ancients viewed shadow entities, and just small spoiler for tomorrow night on Ancient Aliens, we are going to talk about that during the show tomorrow night too. So ancient Egypt, they had a concept of 7 different parts of the soul. I say that, but it really depends on who you talk to, because some people say it's 5, some people say it's 9. In the research that I've done, most of the information says 7. But again, I think it just depends on who you talk to. But one of those parts of the soul was the K-bit, or the shadow. And again, this is another weird aspect. So I'm not going to show the clip here because the audio is terrible, and I showed you guys the clip a few weeks back with Mohammed Ibrahim and I right outside the Red Pyramid talking about shadow entities in the Egyptian culture, and he actually uses the word chateau with a T. So that's another. I mean, it's almost a straight verbatim. It's almost like a transliteration rather than a translation. But there is a chateau word. But again, you do some of the research and dive into some of this material. K-bit is another word that they use for shadow, the shadow part of the soul. So this image here is from the tomb of Arinifer, which is in the Theban necropolis. It's one of the tombs of the nobles. And you see the shadow figure here right outside the tomb. Now, he is to linger here on Earth. So the shadow stays here on Earth, as well as the ka, the animating part of the soul. At least the ka does for a period of time. The other parts of the soul move on to the constellation of Orion at death. So you see a couple of bod birds here, and the one is starting to take flight to make that transition. So, kind of a similar concept here with the Choctaw Native American cultures. Now, Native American cultures, depending on which tribe it is, they each had a little bit of a different take on their spiritual aspects, but several of them also believed in multiple parts of the soul. And again, it kind of depends on the tribe. It might be two, three, five different parts of the soul. The Choctaw believed in two different parts of the soul. The Shalombish, the outside shadow, and the Shalup, the inside shadow or ghost. And that inside shadow, the Shalup, goes on to the land of the ghosts at death. The Shalombish, however, the outside shadow, stays here on earth. So we see these different concepts of shadow spirituality, either remaining here on earth, other different parts going on to, stars and constellations, or going on into different realms, into different dimensions, whatever, the land of the ghosts may be. That is some other dimensional plane or plane of existence out there. And what we're trying to figure out and determine is, okay, what exactly is that? Um, Another interesting line from Archive 81. Again, I'm not trying to give away any spoilers, and I think one line is not going to ruin anything, but it's mentioned every world has its own frequency, which is a very interesting concept. We're going to explore this evening, because the universe is vibration. Everything within within the universe is moving. Of course, this is the connected universe, so everything is connected. But you take all these objects around you. I mean, it seems solid. I seem solid. My body parts are moving, I guess. This microphone seems pretty stationary. Here's an ink pen that seems pretty solid, but it's really not. When you get down to the molecular construction of these items in these small atoms, those atoms are vibrating together. And depending on the vibration, you get different materials, different like elasticity. It's kind of like when you heat up an item and it starts to melt, you're changing the composition of it because of the applied heat. Now the atoms are vibrating differently together than they were before, but they're always in a state of motion. They're always vibrating. So how is this applicable to the shadow dimension? All right, let's take a look at dimensions. And it's been a little while since I've shown you guys this particular diagram. It may have been back in the Beyond the Shadows days. Not sure. So these are our kind of well, there's four objects here, but it's really three dimensions because the period, the dot, some people consider it dimension 0. The first dimension, though, is just a line. Point A to point B, that's it. The second dimension, 2D, is a flat plane. So, like a, flat piece of paper. 3D is now an object, a, three-dimensional block, or my computer that's here, or monitor, or me, or you. That's three-dimensional. We live and exist in the fourth dimension, what we refer to as time. So every dimension can see the ones below it, but they can't see the ones above it or beyond it. They don't have any concept really of it, or they may have an idea that there's something else out there, but they can't get there. They can't see it. You take a just speck of dust on that piece of paper, it can't quite grasp that there's bigger, larger objects, outside. Let's say the piece of paper is on a table. The idea that there's a world outside of that piece of paper on the table is beyond them. They can't seemingly get there, and that's kind of our challenge with us. We can see everything below us. We can see the dot. We can see the line. We can see the piece of paper. We can see a 3D object. But beyond time, that's where we start having some issues. So that's the first 4 dimensions. So there are other dimensions, however, out there. When we get into superstring theory, there's supposed to be 10, 11 if you count that dot. But that's really like dimension 0. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. So the next level above us, the 5th dimension, you should be able to see everything below that. So from the 5th dimension, you should see time. And people represent this with a tesseract. So I show this cube. It's kind of a cube on top of a cube, and to me, it's a it's kind of a layman's representation. We use it, but it's just, I mean, overall looking at it, it's a cube on top of a cube. So really, it's just a bigger cube. I think it's just our way of trying to represent something that we're, having a hard time conceptualizing. This is not, when you use the word tesseract, we're not talking about the Marvel Magic Cube, the glowy cube that ends up with the Infinity Stone inside of it, but they use it as like a portal device sort of thing. That's not what a real tesseract is. Basically, a tesseract, from the 5th dimension, should be able to see time. And we see this represented, some of you will recognize this. We see this represented in the movie Interstellar, where within the tesseract, within the 5-dimensional space, uh, Cooper is able to see all these various representations of his daughter's bedroom throughout all time. All he has to do is go to one, and it's a different moment in time. And that's kind of what they're trying to do, the beings that they call them. They're trying to get him to find that right moment in time, and he's able to see every single one. It's a 3D representation of time. So, and Sarah's asking, could a 5th dimension be consciousness? We're going to get to consciousness here in a little bit. And then asking, tesseracts are hypercubes. Well, I don't like viewing them as a hypercube. That's kind of because, again, trying to conceptualize what a level above time would look like, our minds think in terms of 3 dimensions. So we're taking a 3-dimensional representation and applying that to a concept that is beyond us. We could take our own creative minds and try to uh, create something that should represent the concept, but it's a concept I don't think we quite grasp. And when we start seeing these different realities and these different things happen within our plane of existence that we don't really have answers for, like we see a ghost, we see a shadow entity, different crazy things like that happen. We see, um, you know, dancing balls of light that have no explanation. Suddenly they materialize and dematerialize right in front of you. Things like that. Um, you know, we have a hard time trying to really answer what those things are. Most times they get pawned off as it's your imagination, it's legend of lore, these entities, ghosts don't really exist, you're crazy, that sort of thing. But no, people experience these things all the time. So we're going to do a real quick dimensional lesson here on superstring theory, just really, really fast, because I don't want to, kind of blow people out of the water here with a lot of it. But because the way like kind of as official, quote unquote, official superstring theory, the way they view the 5th dimension is a little bit different than I think we would normally conceive that, like the movie, like I was showing the movie Interstellar. Um, that was the way they portrayed the fifth dimension. According to superstring theory, it's a little bit different. So it's a nice graphic for you. Um, so they say fifth dimension, we would see a world slightly different from our own that would give us a means of measuring the similarity and differences between our world and other possible ones. So they're saying we could see our world, but also other possible. It's almost like we could see parallel universes. And then they say with the sixth dimension, we would see a plane of possible worlds, like we were just saying, where we could compare and position all the possible universes that start with the same initial conditions as this one, like the Big Bang. So, in theory, if you can master the fifth and sixth dimension, you could travel back in time or go to different futures. So they're saying from the sixth, you would have time travel and essentially be able to kind of do what Cooper did in Interstellar, where he was able to view and he was able to interact with those different times, not fully interactive, like he could push the books and that sort of thing. He could affect gravity between the different dimensions, but he couldn't like go out and talk to his daughter, sort of thing, at any point in time. But he could see every point in time. So I think you kind of have a mishmash of different ideas and concepts here. Um, and again, these are our theories on what these things would actually be. Uh, we've used mathematics to show and kind of prove that, hey, these other dimensions exist out there. We haven't actually accessed them, at least knowingly access them or willingly, like, on, you know, drop of a hat, I'm going to go to this dimension. Okay, so that's fifth and sixth. Seventh, you would have access to possible worlds that start with different initial conditions. Whereas in the fifth and sixth, the initial conditions were the same and subsequent actions were different. Here in the seventh, everything is different from the very beginning of time. So every time um, you would have like a different result from the Big Bang. The eighth, again, a plane of such possible universe histories, each of which begins with different initial conditions and branches out infinitely. And this is where you get infinite universes. The ninth, to compare all the possible universe history, starting with all the different possible laws of physics and initial conditions. And 10th, we arrive at the point in which everything is possible and imaginable is covered. So really, they're just adding through each of these possible dimensions, they are adding another layer of possibility, another possibility, another possibility. So, where before you had the same starting conditions for a universe, once you get down the road, it's like you have an innumerable number of different starting conditions for a universe. And this gets into the idea, of course, of what we were talking about a few weeks ago with the multiverse and all these different possible universes that may be out there, may even be replicating themselves over and over and over again. So, given our topic for this evening, the shadow dimension is one of these universes, then the shadow dimension. Okay, so got a couple of clips here for you, and I was earlier I had in my show notes to already have played one for you, so I'm gonna have to do these back to back a little bit. I'm gonna give you Johnny Enoch and Mary Marshall first. Now that we're hitting on multiple universes, Johnny has a nice little quote in here, but some interesting information from both of them. So let me cue this up for you guys.
I tend to think that these were interdimensional beings. I've heard people talk about ghosts and spirits, apparitions, and what their encounters are like. And I've even seen sort of a ghostly figure before when I've stayed in castles in Europe. I've seen things out of the corner of my eyes. These beings, I would describe the encounter as much different. There's something about them that it was like, what is this? Who are they? I tend to think they're from another dimensional space. We know now that we live in a multiverse. In fact, we live in a multi-dimensional multiverse. And how we know that is through something known as the Wilkinson's Microwave Anisotropy Probe, or the WMAP scan for short. And what it tells us is that the radioactive background of our universe has these patterns in the background, these circuitous patterns. And these patterns are indicative that our universe is replicating itself. Not only is it expanding, it's growing. And as you mentioned, there is this universe that has existed before it, but there's other universes. And what we now believe in our cosmological theories, in our theoretical physics, is that we live in a vast ocean full of universes with these little bubbles, and they're all connected.
I call it gravitation.
The real question we have to ask ourselves is, where are these shadow beings coming from? Are they in a dimensional space from our universe? Could they be traversing here from other universes?
Yeah, that was really strange there. Lost the audio on Mary for some odd reason. Not sure why, but basically Mary was talking about her believing that that this is a gravitational distortion, is what she was talking about. She gives a little detail, but it's all in the Shadow Dimension docuseries, so you can catch that there as well. Betty was asking who came up with string theory. So you're talking about like a series of theoretical physicists going back into at least the 1950s. That's really when it started to kind of get some steam. Basically, these different physicists coming up with a variety of different ideas, and over time kind of getting all this together. So it's not like one single person that really put it together. It's a number of people over time. So yeah, again, apologize for the audio there. I'm not sure why that cut out. Okay, so the other clip that I want to share with you guys on this is from Carl Johnson, where he starts talking about different realities. This was at the Conjuring house, and he and I, when we filmed for the Shadow Dimension, that was a good year and a half ago now, September 2020. It was kind of like the first major thing we were able to do during COVID. And we had a really interesting dinner talking about a lot of these different theoretical concepts. So when we filmed the next day at the Conjuring house, I was like, Carl, let's just have like a back and forth conversation, you and me, rather than just me, but we did some of me just having Carl talk and tell stories and give insight and all that of experiences there at the house. I was like, let's have a back and forth conversation and just kind of recreate the conversation we had last night over dinner. So that's what this particular clip is. We got into an interesting discussion, I thought, while we were having dinner about interdimensional beings, portals. Is there perhaps a portal on this property? Is that why there's so much activity that goes on here? Perhaps with the shadow entity and other things that happen here. Corey was talking about light bursts that they've seen here as well. Of course, there's a story of Andrea and her family seeing apparently another family in the other room
from the past,
and they looked at them as if they were a ghost. So that's part of my research here, not just shadow people specifically, but what are their origins? Are they coming to us from another dimension? Are some of these perhaps time travelers? There's even the idea that they could be extraterrestrials. And even if they are extraterrestrials, are they actually using some sort of interdimensional means to travel here?
There has to be something to it. I think this is kind of an opening to another reality, and presences come and go. Whether they do it of their own volition or it just happens, I don't know. But that's only been further borne out by my experience here today. While you were talking with the historian, I was in the next room, and it felt like, almost like in a fun house. You start to feel like the floor is moving underneath. And I felt like getting pulled away. My emotions came to forefront. I mean, nothing anybody would have noticed, but I just felt like a visceral response to the room, to the environment. To really describe that, it's almost like if you're in the ocean and you feel a undercurrent, a tow. It feels like that, but on more of a psychic level. Like something, I belong someplace else suddenly.
Yeah.
It's got gravity, it's pulling me into it. And that's probably as accurate as I could describe it, except there's an emotional response too. It's like, I don't want to go there, I don't want to be lost in that. But why those rooms? Why not everywhere? Why not here in what's now the kitchen?
Right. It does seem, centrally located to those rooms there, and then I guess the one bedroom above, so it's almost, kind of stacked on top of each other in that area.
Right. People feel things upstairs. Sometimes I do, right above. But mostly in those two rooms I was describing. And the mirror, when I did see myself as younger, it's very strange. It was June of 2019.
Well, time is a human construct, just to describe our reality that we're experiencing right now. And one of the ideas is that time, past, present, future, are all happening concurrently at the same time. And I have something I call stacked time theory, where every moment in time at a particular location stacked on top of each other like that. And is there something with this location, particularly in that area of the house, where, whether it's the energy or what have you, that kicks it off?
There are factors.
Creates this overlapping moment, and then it subsides.
I don't think we'll ever totally have it figured out, but you can conjecture that, there's a lot of lime deposit under the soil that could create a battery, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Just
limestone in the foundation of the house.
Right, there's that. You see, you've got all this, setup, these conductors or receptors, if you will. I theorize that the materials that create a building can actually absorb memories, and sometimes through principles we don't understand yet. Those memories are replayed, and we'll probably never have it totally figured out why in those rooms, why I feel that, why other people have. But it's almost like this other reality is concurrent, it's existing along with ours. They have their timeline and we have ours.
Yeah, and that final concept that Carl is talking about there, multiple realities existing at the same time. They have their timeline, we have ours, is really fascinating. So when we have something, we might call a time slip. Maybe we're seeing another point in time. It could just be, when we talk stacked time theory, so the whole idea of every moment in time at a specific location being stacked on top of each other, like this representation here of the dice. They're not really falling dice per se, as it is, there are moments captured, all stacked on top of each other, of the dice being rolled, and it's kind of cool when you actually see it all stacked up like that. It looks like the dice are kind of swirling around each other. So is it, because we've talked about resonance, we are going to talk about resonance and vibration here very shortly. When we talk about that, is it that we're having a moment in which our two moments in time are resonating at the same frequency, at the same level, and we're able to get a glimpse of that other moment in time, for lack of a better term, if it's all coexisting right here, right now. And so then we see the woman in the Victorian dress, or whoever it is. Andrea Perron saw like an entire family there at the farmhouse there in Harrisville, and then they likewise saw the more modern people. So that's one idea. Or if we have these multiple dimensions all really coexisting together at the same time in the same space, we just don't see each other. But again, kind of the same thing. Something happens where we have that vibration, that resonance, that frequency that kicks off, and for a brief moment we're able to see it. And we've talked about it before, but the Anita Project down in Antarctica, people flipped their lids when they took that data and said, hey, there's there's another parallel universe running in reverse time And that's not what the scientists said. That's what some journalists taking the data interpreted and then wrote their articles concerning that. But if that's true, if you can get to that conclusion from the data, it does cause us to wonder about the nature of the universe and how it works. Is there another world around us working in a reverse time, or is it really the same timeline? One's going forward, one's going backward, looping around each other. Is that the idea of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, and all being cyclical like that? A lot of different rabbit holes that we could go down here. So I do want to talk a little bit about when we actually see these things. So we're talking shadows. When we see a shadow entity, we see something in the corner of the room, run down the hall. Again, we're talking about, is this another dimension that we're seeing? Is something from another dimension entered our plane of existence knowingly, mistakenly? Some people, and Tom McNicholas said he could not join us this evening, unfortunately. But Tom has frequently seen the shadows out of the corner of his eyes. People talk about that, viewing shadow entities or getting a glimpse of them out of their periphery, and they turn and look, and it's gone. That they just suddenly vanished. You get that type of report a lot. And I finally, with my book, A Walk in the Shadows, second edition has been out for a little over a year now, which had 40 more pages than the original first edition, which came out a couple of years ago. Well, I just kind of covertly added 10 more pages to the book ahead of everything that's going on with Ancient Aliens tomorrow. And so it was a little bit of additional information that I wanted to make sure got in there. And part of it is getting a little bit deeper into this idea of seeing these shadows out of the corner of your eye, seeing them in the periphery. What is happening when that happens? What are we actually seeing? What are we getting a glimpse of? This is also, again, talked about in the Shadow Dimension docuseries. So I have a clip here queued up. It's got Johnny and Mary again, but some great insight also from Mark Anthony. So let's go ahead and play this. Okay. It seems like we're not getting any sound on that one either. I will say I was having some issues rendering the videos earlier. I ran out of space in my hard drive, and so I kept having to offload stuff from my system because I was doing all that audiobook work earlier. Let me try this one more time. This is kind of disappointing. Yeah, it's there's no sound. I apologize for that. So basically, the explanation here, and I'll have to go back and play these again sometime. I think what I'll end up doing is I'll upload them on the Connected Universe portal site, so you guys can view those there. Or of course, if you can always watch the Shadow Dimension docuseries for free on Tubi. But I'll go ahead and, of course, what I can do. Okay, here's what I can do when I upload this video, because I put the videos on the Connected Universe portal on the back end. I will go ahead and insert those proper clips in there. So I'll do a little video editing work and get those clips in there so that you guys have that. Because it's some good information there from Johnny, Mary, and Mark. But basically, what they talk about in this clip is what's known as averted vision. So your eyes are made up of rods and cones. The cones are more in the center of your eye, closer to the optic nerve, which give us color and definition. Mark has a nice little term. He's like, yeah, it's basically the high definition camera of your eyes. The rods are on the outside, so they bring in more light. They're more susceptible to variations in light, and so stargazers will use a technique known as averted vision in order to get a better glimpse of celestial objects out of the side of their eyes. And so Mark gives an example of a comet. Um, Mary talks about that you can see slightly into the infrared out of your periphery, in these sorts of things. So when we see that shadow out of our periphery, it's because we're able to see into a little bit of a different light spectrum from that angle. And we see it, and we turn and look straight on, and it seems like it's gone, but it's really not. It's because now we're looking at a slightly different spectrum, a little bit of a different frequency than we had out of the periphery. So again, the stargazers use this technique called averted vision to be able to see celestial objects, and that's why, like if you take part in like an astronomers club, and their eyes adjust to full dark night, so they can see the stars very brilliantly, and all of a sudden somebody lights up I was going to say candle, but it's like, what in the world am I thinking of? Flashlight. Sorry. Somebody lights up a flashlight, and all of a sudden it blows out their eyes, and it takes like a good half hour to readjust down to that. So our eyes are susceptible to these things, and different parts of the eyes see into different spectrums. So what is it then that we are seeing? Okay, so it's different light waves, different light frequencies coming from where? So another thing I added to A Walk in the Shadows, because it took place after the last publication, but I think is really important and is going to be part of the Shadow Dimension Season 2. I had a hypnosis session with Ariana Corsino, who's been on Edge of the Rabbit Hole. She's a trained hypnotherapist, trained under Dolores Cannon. She's very, very good. Victoria has also gone through a session with Ariana. And through that, I'm not going to get into the whole session, but the most pertinent thing that came out of that for this class this evening was when we talked about my first shadow experience when I was about 8 years old, and what exactly happened in that moment. This thing standing in the corner, it physically interacted with me. What the heck happened? So we got into those details, and some of the questions that started getting, of course, tossed out there was, who or what is this thing? What was it doing there, and where did it come from? So this was some other life form that had traveled here to Earth from elsewhere, was interested in humans and studying humans, did not realize originally at first that I could see it. And when I realized it frightened me, the whole crossing the arms and all that was actually, it was trying to have me do like a self hug. And from this other perspective, I could see it actually patting me on the wrist, like trying to calm me down, which didn't work. I was terrified. I was 8 years old and there was an intruder in the house. But the interesting question of where was it from? The answer was, it was from a different space. So the follow-up question was, okay, do you mean a different dimension? And the response to that was, well, you might call it a dimension, but really it's another space, which is really a head scratcher. What does that mean? Other space. If we're not talking dimensions, as we kind of talked about that before. What exactly is it? Because if you go through that list of dimensions that we had before, it was really just another perspective on top of another perspective on top of another perspective. And we talk about other planes of existence. We've been talking about a different frequencies lining up, and we're able to see it's another glimpse of our own reality. But this other space makes it seem like it's somewhere else that they've traveled from. They've come here using some other means of transport. Another great line from Mark. Quoting a lot of Mark Anthony here this evening. He says, this is from episode 1 of the Shadow Dimension. We may very well be dealing with several different entities, several different species using a similar energetic modality in order for them to communicate or to visit what we call Earth. I did throw that at the Ancient Aliens guys twice during the interview. And so I'm thinking they might use that for tomorrow's episode. But I love that line. Absolutely love it. Because we see a lot of different types of shadow entities. Again, we're not getting into the different types and the specifics, but humanoid figure, the hat-wearing entities, the crawlers, the mists, the wisps, hooded figures, all different types. They all look different. They all seem to have different agendas, different functions, which is why whenever somebody asks me, okay, what is a shadow person? It's like, you have a couple hours? Because we could get into a lot of details about these different things, the old hags and all of that. It's not just one set thing. It's different, like Mark said, different species coming from elsewhere. So this thing was in my room, some other life form that had used this, whatever this mode of transportation was, to appear in our plane of existence as a shadow. So where was this space or dimension it came from, and how was it accessible? Well, and I just realized I had this little video clip queued up, but my microphone is muted when it shows video, so that's not going to work. But they also show vibration, and that's what I want to talk about now, because we've kind of touched on it a little bit here and there, that the universe is essentially vibration. All these different things are connected, but they're all connected, through various vibrations of our molecules, our atoms, these different things that create and make the universe. Everything's vibrating together. And there's, in a lot of ways, it looks like chaos, but there's a lot of harmony within it as well. So I'm going to throw a couple of esoteric quotes out from you. So some of this is from like the Kabbalion and other sources. So modern science has proven that all that we call matter and energy are but modes of vibratory motion. And some of the more advanced scientists are rapidly moving toward the positions of the occultists, who hold that the phenomena of mind are likewise modes of vibration or motion. And so I'm going to show something here in just a moment of science kind of coming around to these concepts that we've been, people have been talking about for thousands of years, and they're like, oh yeah, we discovered this. It's like, guys, come on. So another one: differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration. Then all particles of matter are in circular movement, and that's what Johnny was talking about, the circuitous patterns earlier. From corpuscle to suns, the planets revolve around suns, and many of them turn on their axes. The suns move around greater central points, and these are believed to move around still greater, and so on ad infinitum. So, that's why we see so many different, patterns of circles, within our universe. When we're talking about these bubble universes, they're circles, they're spheres, essentially is what they are. You take our sun is a sphere. The Earth is a sphere. The solar system, I mean, it has its axis in its plane, but outwardly it's a sphere. It's a bubble. So, and this really adheres to a lot of the different things that we've been talking about here in recent weeks. So we've talked a lot about circles, right? The stone circles and that vortex energy that wells up within that circle. We saw the rollright stones the other week, and the way the energy rotates within that circle. And it's that rotation, that circle of that energy. And when we talked about last week, the secret societies, they're trying to tap into that type of energy. So this is the thing that I was mentioning before that I find kind of funny. So a recent paper in the International Journal of Astrobiology, just published here, that in it, they represent the idea of planetary intelligence, which describes a collective knowledge and cognition of an entire planet. They suggest that large-scale networks of life could form a vast invisible intelligence that profoundly alters the condition of the entire planet, which a lot of our esoteric teachings that have been handed down through the ages speak of the universe and all planes of existence are like mental creations of a higher power, that that the earth is speaking to us, the universe is speaking to us, that there is that life is consciousness, the planet is consciousness, the universe is consciousness. It's not a new concept, yet they publish this paper saying, oh, hey, we discovered that the planet may have a consciousness. It's like, this isn't new, guys. It's not new. Get down toward the last few minutes here. Let me check your comments. So, okay. Betty Lange asked, when we dream, can we move into another dimension or time? Do we open our own portal? So that's an interesting question. So it's been a while since I've covered dreams. And there are people who believe that when you dream, you're entering another reality. Maybe it's a parallel universe. Maybe you are opening a door or a portal into another world. If that's true, my parallel selves have made some really poor decisions, and there's some really scary worlds out there. So that is one idea. I would say that in some cases there are doors that are open to a more ethereal plane. Like people report dream visitations from loved ones, actual, not just dreaming of a loved one that has passed away, but an actual visitation from a loved one. I've had it happen to me. So there is some sort of door that's open, or, the consciousness is really disconnecting from the body at that point and maybe is able to visit with other consciousnesses, or the idea that our conscious isn't here with us, that our body is picking up a transmission from where our consciousness is. So a lot of different ideas, but yeah, you're on to something there, Betty. Sarah asking, how often do groups of people see shadow phenomena at the same time? I can't give you a specific number as far as how often. It does happen. There are several investigations that I've done. We've seen, hey, there's a shadow. Did you see that, shadow dart in that door? There were like, 3 or 4 of us that saw it. The black smoke morphing into the apparition of a little girl. There were 5 of us there at the time, and we all saw her a little differently. And that also speaks to personal resonance, vibration, frequency, that we all saw her a little differently because we each have our own personal resonance, our own personal vibration, and she had her own vibration and resonance as well. So I can't really tell you how often that would be, because sure, there are plenty of times you're on investigation with somebody and you see a shadow go down the hall. They didn't see it, but I might be with somebody that is resonating on a totally different frequency, and they're just not going to. So we've talked before. We've had an entire class on personal resonance. We were talking about, some people see more apparitions than shadows. Others see more shadows than apparitions, and that's because of our own personal vibration and frequency. So I'm one that sees more shadows than apparitions, and I believe over time, as you start to interact with more and more of these different things, your body becomes in tune to those things. So because I have seen more shadows than apparitions, I become more in tune to them. Not that I never see apparitions, I do, just not as often. And my body kind of recognizes more, oh, hey, this type of energy is over here. I'm going to tune into that, and then boom, I can see it a little bit better. Where with apparitions and other phenomena, I'm going to have a little bit of a harder time. I might be able to pick up something's here, but to actually be able to tune into it, get a good glimpse of it, that might be a little bit more difficult for me. So, so real quickly, okay, we're not going to have time to get into a couple of these other different things, because I wanted to get into sound and vibration, and kind of, they talk about, okay, the music of the spheres, music of the universe, that there is, our universe has a like a certain music to it, a certain song that is playing. And we've seen where, like, the Great Pyramid of Giza is tuned to the key of F sharp. And I've been there. I've been in there. It's not just somebody wrote it in a book and said, hey, this is cool. Tom Danley did a lot of experiments there. And so we verified that last June when I went into the Great Pyramid. He said, this is tuned to the key of F sharp, and that coffer inside is tuned to the key of A. And our planet is supposed to also be tuned to the key of F sharp. So you see, again, we don't really have time to dive into it because we're right at our hour mark. And I try to wrap it up at an hour for the class, because this ends up going out to an audio podcast later on different platforms, and they need their hour. So we're going to talk a little bit about somatics, which we did a little bit the other week, but I was going to give a little bit more background on it. We don't have time for that. But a possibility is that when we see something like a shadow coming through, or even an apparition that's not quite fully formed, that we're starting to tune into whatever frequency that is, but not fully. And so we're just kind of getting a glimpse of whatever that is. Kind of almost like an example I threw out there, like an analogy, is kind of like the black keys on a piano. And kind of a nice, easy analogy, because black, shadows, that sort of thing, where it's not a full step down. It's like a half step. So it's kind of like that in between state. Still necessary, for different things you might want to play, different songs, different melodies, but it's different than just going boom, boom from one white key to another, if that makes any sense. All right. And then the other little aside that I was going to throw in there is J.R.R. Tolkien. When he wrote the Silmarillion, he was creating his Middle Earth universe. The thing that he used to create it was sound. There was a music that created the universe, according to him. So one of those legends, again, it's a fictional legend, but it's using some of that esoteric knowledge to tell the fiction. And so question again is, what is the shadow dimension? It's another place. It's another space that's not on the same frequency as ours, but sometimes we're able to get a glimpse of that when we start getting tuned just a little bit the right way. And entities and beings from that dimensional space are able to travel here from there. They have apparently more knowledge on how to use those frequencies to be able to travel across the universe, or maybe even across universes? Or, are they somewhere in one of those dimensions that we talked about with string theory? Or is it a completely different concept? That, again, string theory is just a theory. So is it something else when we talk about, a alternate plane of existence, or a altered state of consciousness? Is it all, and this is where the consciousness bit was going, if the whole thing is consciousness, is it just being able to access another space within that consciousness using, again, vibration and frequency? So these are things that we are going to explore, and maybe one day answer, probably not fully, but maybe we'll get a few glimpses into what's really going on. So, all right, everybody, that is it for Connecting the Universe this week. What is the shadow dimension? We'll be on our regular time next Wednesday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern. ConnectedUniversePortal.com. Of course, tomorrow, for members of the Connected Universe, join us for the watch party. We'll start that around 8:30, 8:45 p.m. Eastern. And then, of course, the show airs at 9 p.m. So we'll have fun with that. So, all right, everybody, we'll see you next time. If time really exists.